What is the best way to watch a fishing tournament?
What, Chris?
Live stream.
For the win.
Hey, what do you call a cow with no legs?
What?
Ground beef.
Welcome to the Geeky A Go-Go podcast, a weekly podcast where we dive into all things you beautiful nerds love. Movies, TV, comics, cosplay. If it's in the pop cultural zeitgeist, we'll talk about it here. My name is Anthony Pizzuto. Let's get this party started. Joining me today in the Go-Go, Nitro Chris and Eric Ho. Tim B is currently eating turkey legs and wearing Mickey ears in the Magic Kingdom, so he won't be joining us this week. Chris, what have you been up to this week?
Hey everybody. This week I wanted to talk about something and I forgot what it was. I'm going to pass it off to Eric while I remember what I was talking about.
Wow. All right.
It's terrible preparation. Sorry.
Well, this as we're recording this past week was Thanksgiving. So did a lot of fun stuff. Mostly I got to fry my annual turkey. It's my annual fried turkey quota of the year.
That's right.
So we got to do that, and we hosted a bunch of folks. We got a karaoke machine. So, Chris, feel free to bring the fam over to and you too, Pizzuto, for some karaoke sessions. So there you go.
Karaoke's the best. We should do a Geeky A Go-Go karaoke party. Like, just rent out one of those rooms in the city down in like the village and have a karaoke party. We'll invite all of our friends.
Well, seeing as we're all neighbors, we can probably just all come to my house.
That is true. But are you going to make Korean wings?
We can cater Korean wings. And by the way, let me tell you, this karaoke machine is from China, so 80% of it is in Chinese. So we'll see how it goes.
All right.
I realized over Black Friday, because again, this is posts. Actually, today is Cyber Monday, but I realized over the past weekend that I get way too many advertisements for emails, like an inappropriate amount. So I pretty much spent my entire weekend unsubscribing to every single Black Friday, Cyber Monday email, multiple emails per hour from the same place, stuff that I haven't bought in years. I only need one of. I'm not going to knock any brands because maybe they're going to be future sponsors of the show, but please just listen to the people of the world. We don't need 7,000 emails a day for the same product over and over and over again.
Yeah, that's pretty excessive. Did any of them tempt you to buy anything?
I only made one purchase for Black Friday, and that is the microphone that I'm speaking into right now. I wanted to take advantage of that deal to enhance our little podcast here, and hopefully I sound better than my previous one.
You sound beautiful, Chris. Eric, did you pick up anything on Black Friday or Cyber Monday?
I may or may not have bought another costume. Or let me rephrase, parts toward a possible costume that I wanted to build for 2024.
Are we going to get a hint as to what that might be, or are you going to surprise us?
Well, knowing how slow, well, the way I build costumes is it comes in bursts. So if I tease you guys now, we might not see this for quite a while. So let's just, we'll see when it shows up.
Tease us when you get to 75%. Yeah, I didn't do much for Black Friday either. I picked up a new light for my desk because I've rearranged my desk in my home office, and now my light source has gone away. So I needed a cool new kind of video conferencing light. So I picked one up for a really great discount from this brand that I've had my eye on for a while. But other than that, no. Yeah, it's been a quiet week. I mean, it's not springtime, it's wintertime. So I feel like the kids are just in a constant state of illness, which means that I'm in a constant state of illness. And as you know, Chris, we had to postpone our recording because you were sick yesterday. But yeah, a couple days before Thanksgiving, I was down for the count. I was sick as a dog. And it's the most wonderful time of year, folks. So have kids, they said. It'll be fun, they said. Lies. It's lies. All right, I think it's time to dive in with the news. While the SAG-AFTRA strike officially ended the beginning of November, there's been a lot of rumblings from the over 160,000 members that the deal that was negotiated may not be everything they hoped for. Some of the key sticking points were protections against artificial intelligence and wage increases through streaming residuals. While the tentative agreement does offer guardrails around AI protections, many members are not too keen on the verbiage they have seen within the original deal points. Now, normally during the ratification of a new contract, deal points are sent and socialized to the members prior to being voted on, which did happen. However, because there is so much concern over the final language, members called for the full draft agreement to be shared. This was released to the membership around November 20th, and with the curtain pulled up, more and more folks are diving into the details. The biggest concern appears to be around the use of actors' virtual avatars and how they are paid and used. For example, a studio can scan an actor, then reuse them without the consent of the actor if the film remains quote unquote substantially as scripted, performed, and or recorded. Do any of you know what that means? Because I sure don't. Now, what's worse is that the studios can decide what does and does not count as substantially as scripted. Now, as a disclaimer, I am a member of SAG-AFTRA. However, at the time of recording, I have not voted yes or no yet. Unlike my brothers and sisters in the union, I don't do a lot of work under the commercial and theatrical contracts, so I'm sitting on the sidelines and absorbing all the information before making an informed decision. All right, boys. I just spoke a lot, and I'm sorry about that, but there's a lot to unpack here. This is wild stuff. Rise of the machines level of concern from our acting community. Add to the fact that there was speculation that the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, which is the group SAG was striking against, forced their hand and made SAG accept their second, last and final offer, otherwise suffer the removal of items as the 2024 release and production slate was already getting jeopardized. So, Chris, I'm going to toss this one over to you to start with because you're deeply involved with unions or your own union for a long time now. You've held official positions in your union. Do you think SAG rushed this out of the negotiating room? Do you think the AMPTP forced SAG's hand to end the strike?
Very interesting point. Without being an insider too much on the on what's going on and not being an actor or anything like that myself, it's hard to say exactly if they'd made the wrong decision. Everyone kind of wants to get back to work. That I have that feeling. It was kind of like, hey, we're not striking anymore. All the shows started up again and whatnot. People are back to work. I don't know if it's everyone just got to a breaking point. And there was a lot of pressure towards the leadership, say, hey, you need to come up with something, or it was downward pressure saying this is our final offer. And because this is a private sector, I'm in the public sector. Uh, because it's private sector, I don't know if there's any other step beyond this is our final offer, right? Like, is there an impasse situation where mediators come in, like, and I don't know if it's up to that point already. I couldn't speak exactly to all that,
Mhm.
but I mean, it doesn't seem like it's. I don't like that tricky language, right? It leaving gray area, like something very vague like that should be clarified, in my opinion.
Oh, agree 100%. Especially when it comes to your own likeness, you want those words to be very black and white, no gray. And then, so I've not lived through a a negotiation or agreement that's ever been voted no. And there is a likelihood that the membership could not choose to ratify this agreement, which would be the first in I think a very long time, at least that I can remember. And so what will happen then is then the negotiations will have to take up again. We don't know that if the strike will happen again, but they'll have to go back to the negotiating table, and that could be very interesting. We could potentially get better, or we could potentially get worse if we go back to the negotiating table. Eric, is SAG-AFTRA right to be concerned over AI protections? What do you think about that?
I think so. I mean, you don't know how this is like the running joke, right? Of people becoming like a stock photo person, and all of a sudden you're like everywhere. I mean, this is literally the same equivalent where you get paid what, $200, $50 to be using a stock photo, and you don't know where it's going to show up, right?
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I think rightfully so. I also wonder, I come from more of a technology background, whether these are the kind of things that come up around the use of different kind of technology to keep track of how folks are using your likeness, for example, where kind of
Hmm.
situation, right? Like this is the same thing that in the recording industry has tried to attempt to do over the years around royalty and all that kind of good stuff. Are there similar things we could possibly be doing here? And then, by the way, like on the other side, maybe there are people who just want to sell away their likeness and just
Hmm.
go, you know what, I don't care. Like, use me as an extra in all the movies that you're ever gonna make in the background, right? And I just think that yes, this is a topic that folks probably will want to look a little bit more into, honestly. But like Chris said, the reality is folks probably just want to get back to work, right?
Sure.
And I suspect you know, we are in the room when folks are negotiating these things, right? And so, who knows what they had to give up or why they did what they did. But well, let me ask you, when do y'all have to? When's the deadline on voting on these things?
So yeah, that's a great question. The voting deadline is December 5th. That's when all the votes need to be in. Uh, I don't recall what the last agreement came in at in terms of approval, but there's just so much chatter about this one, especially around the language with AI, and there's so much advocacy against the language and the AI. And you brought up an interesting point. Uh, you know, there is language about, yes, you could be compensated if if your digital avatar is used in other scenes. But who's policing that? Who's making sure that you're actually getting credit for those scenes or those days that you should have been filming on, but your digital avatar was being filmed instead or being used instead? And there's a lack of oversight there, which is also an area of consternation for the membership. So it is really fascinating that how AI, it's only been a year and a half, or I think, since Chat GPT exploded and AI became a true part of our everyday conversation of our nomenclature. Like we've always known what AI is, but I feel like it's still a very new thing. And it's amazing how quickly it has impacted such a huge labor organization. And kind of in the vein of AI. So as consumers of content, and especially, we as Star Wars fans recently, saw this come to life in Rogue One and in The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. But as consumers of content, would seeing an AI representation of an actor change your perspective of the film and or the actor who was being represented by this digital technology?
I mean, honestly, are we gonna care? Like, there are some of these things where I think that the acting industry has evolved so much over the last few years, that the last few decades, that uh, I don't know that we are definitively looking at the need for. This is playing devil's advocate here, around like a recognizable name to carry a movie, for example, right? Could it very well be? Could we get to a place where everything in the movie is just computer generated? I wouldn't think that's too far off the path. I mean, you look at, um, I mean, it's a slightly different, but over in Asia in particular, a lot of these online music videos, all these kind of things, like there are virtual characters being created and fandoms
Mhm.
following these virtual characters. And as a matter of fact, they're managing companies who are out there saying things like, "Well, these people are easier. These online AI avatars are easier to manage than actual human beings, right?" And so, where do we as a society start looking at some of these things and go, I honestly, I think a lot of folks would just be like, all right, cool, like I've accepted that this is artificially generated and it is what it is, and I still believe it and I like it kind of situation. Or are we gonna see a reckoning where people just go like, no, that's just weird, man. Like I'm not gonna go after that, and I'm gonna follow that. I don't know where we're gonna fall, honestly.
Mhm.
But I do think that we're reaching that point in the next few years where I think we're gonna be seeing a lot more of these kind of computer generated characters who are running onto the screen and with substantial roles, not just kind of background characters.
What do you think, Chris?
I mean, CGI has been around for a very long time, right? Toy Story, however far back you want to go at Pixar and whatnot. But that was all in an animation role, right? Things were being animated. That's what they were using it as. However, yeah, AI was being applied. I shouldn't say AI in the sense that it's an artificial intelligence that people are doing. It's acting on its own. It's more of like algorithmic things were happening. How to apply textures to scenes, how
Mm.
to Lord of the Rings, how does the armies interact with each other as they're clashing in the middle of the battlefield. You know, they plug in like, oh, there's a couple characters should run away at some point. So if you're watching all the little you know elves and orcs and all that stuff as they're coming at each other, you're seeing all these things happening.
Hmm.
So things were being applied. It's kind of led up to this, as the technology advanced. Um, are we at the point where you can take an animation, like think of, although it's not that great of a movie, but at the time it was lauded as something really awesome. The Final Fantasy film, they were like, oh, it's so hyper realistic and whatnot. Can you take something that's animated or I don't know, digitized, sculpted, whatever is the proper terminology, and apply an artificial intelligence where it can act by itself? I don't know if we're there yet. Maybe to a point. Um, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm completely wrong on that. Um, there has to be a lot of user input, I think, right now. We're not that far off.
I think that's the concern is the generative AI component to it. Where it's one thing for me to be on set, read a script and translate a script the way I feel it should be directed and react to the direction, but then, put on a performance that is convincing to an audience versus being scanned and having a producer, a writer type into a platform. Anthony says this in this way, and then moves off camera, and then through generative AI, it produces my character doing that. So yeah, I think we're still on the point where we have to have all these endpoints, and that's one of the big concerns is you don't know what you're going to be seen saying. It's like deep fake to the nth degree, right? So going back to the original question though, so your point is spot on about Toy Story. What's the difference between Toy Story and generative AI? Because in essence, your digital avatar is an animation. So would you watch a movie knowing that Tom Hanks' voice was used, but he never stepped foot into a recording studio to do it? Would that change your opinion of the movie to know that he physically had to do zero work, zero emoting, zero memorization, zero driving down the 405 to a studio to record his lines? Would that change your perspective of the film at all?
Could,
Will they promote a film like this is Tom Hanks?
Absolutely.
um, I mean, did they? I could be wrong on this, but I've heard, and I'm probably wrong, but I might not be. Uh, they've done it with Darth Vader already, haven't they?
Well,
And
well,
James.
so yes. So James Earl Jones actually signed off and sold his voice to Disney. So he like no longer owns the rights to his voice. So Disney can literally do whatever he wants. It's like when the Beatles sell their music catalog. James Earl Jones sold his voice.
Yeah, but James Earl Jones got paid for it,
Oh yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And without knowing the specifics to that. I'm sure there's some kind of a state clause or something like that. So the grade of actor that we're talking about here is like someone who's very respected and probably has really good agent and whatnot,
Mhm.
and is Darth Vader, right? They're no matter how many animated shows or whatever the case may be, it's not the same as James Earl Jones, right? When you hear Darth Vader's voice. Um, and so he may have seen the writing on the wall and said, you know what, I'm nearing the end of my career, if not the end of my life. He is up there,
Mhm.
and said, you know what, I want to do this in perpetuity for the fans. I want to do this in the perpetuity of Star Wars, and I want it to live on. And maybe he did it. There's a little self-serving there, or he did it for the fandom. I don't know. I couldn't answer any of those questions. Uh, but so it exists, right?
Mhm.
He someone has done it already. To your question about Tom Hanks's Woody, to me,
Mhm.
although I know his brother does a lot of the work.
Right.
Um, I I don't know. I mean, would I fault Tom Hanks if he did the same thing? Probably not. But I don't know how much more Pixar slash Disney or whoever is going to push Toy Story, right? Because the last one seemed to kind of put a final stamp on it.
While you say that, they always manage to come back with another one. Look, for me, it comes down to real. It's consent to me, right? I think
Yeah.
it really comes down to uh, did this individual cognize like proactively, willingly, kind of provided the ability to do all that, right? For you to do that, and it. So you're asking me as a fan would I watch something like that, and if you're telling me that Tom Hanks knew nothing about this and don't want this to happen, then yeah, I will not be interested in something like that. But like, because in the back of my mind, there's almost again bit of a tangent here, but I know there's a whole industry of people with like voices, right?
Mhm.
Like people who sound like Morgan Freeman, people who sound like whatever, right? And they make a living doing exactly that, right? And they do that in commercials. They do that, and people go, "Was that like Morgan Freeman?" Right? And so, um, like so it comes down to I don't think that like of course I would go see a movie because of maybe an actor actress kind of attached to this thing, right? uh if they're going to make a huge deal out of it and promote the fact that this is Tom Hanks attached to this thing, I would like to know whether Tom Hanks actually like it, like that this is him or not, regardless of whether it's him voicing it or they generating things around it.
It's a slippery slope, right? I caution, as someone who's very pro labor, I caution people saying, "Pay me now," and you're screwing the next generation, right? The next, you know, generation of workers and whatnot, because then it becomes, well, they have all these fantastic actors and actresses and whatnot from the late 2000s or 2010s or 2020s that all signed away their likenesses, and then all of a sudden 2030s, 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever, no one can be an actor anymore because it's like, well, we liked all these people and we don't need anybody new. Although the nostalgia thing will probably kick in at some point, be like, wow, look, a real live actor, and it'll come back around full circle. So I caution, whoever has to vote for this, make sure you're informed, make sure you know what that, I would highly suggest get that clarified, that language, because everyone should be informed on what they're voting on.
So to wrap it up, be informed. AI is not consent, and buckle up because this is the start of a huge shift in one industry. Just wait till it comes to other industries, good, bad, or indifferent. All right. So enough about that. We've talked a lot about actors. So, Chris, do you know what time it is?
It's what you're watching time.
I'm so proud of you.
Anthony's been trying to get me to pizzazz this up for a while, so that's the best I could do. What you watching, Anthony?
Well, what am I watching? I finished season half, first half of season 6 of The Crown, and I pretty much cried for an hour and a half. It was just wonderfully done, devastating. Um, They nailed it. So I have yet to find a replacement for The Crown just yet, because I picked up a copy of Final Fantasy 16 and I'm playing that, which is almost like playing a movie. This is a very interesting game. I love the Final Fantasy games, but this one is so much story. It's a 50-hour long movie. That's pretty much what you're playing. So I think I'm going to be tied down with that for the next several what you watchings. But I will try to fill it in with some good content.
Cool beans. Eric, what you watching?
Well, a little relevant to what we're about to talk about, but I have been catching up on the Apple TV show on Godzilla. Um, yeah, that's what I've been watching. Also, British Bake Off.
They both sound like guilty pleasures. Be proud of that, man. You want to watch things. I shame on you for watching stuff on Apple Plus, but whatever.
Oh, I'm proud of British Baking Show,
Yes,
and it's the finale is coming up, and I'm very psyched for next week.
nice. And to round out the room, since our favorite not friend is not here, um, I have just finished watching a movie on Netflix called The Railwaymen. Uh, kind of a downer film. It's about a chemical disaster in Bhopal, India, back in the early 1980s. Many people died. It was a dramatization. It was inspired by film. Um, it's one of those based on true events. Uh, Chemical emitted into the air, killed like 15,000 people. Short docudrama, like 4-part series. I liked it a lot. So I was surprised to hear how much regular English is intertwined into the language they speak. I don't want to butcher it. I don't know if they spoke Hindi. I don't know exactly which language they were speaking, but they were using regular English words throughout their speech. Um, I speak Greek fluently, and we call that Gringlish, or Spanglish. I would say someone would use that where they would uh, anglicize, the words, but they were just actually using English words throughout their conversation. I don't know if it was a thing that the Indians do, but it was really cool to watch. Definitely a good watch. I highly recommend it.
You watch like a lot of thoughtful films and shows. I'm noticing through our What You Watching series, which is giving me a whole new appreciation of you, Chris. Whole new appreciation. I feel like I need to up my intellectual curiosity with my television viewing experience.
I
Well,
I
Chris, so is the show kind of like did you watch Chernobyl, that mini
Yes,
series?
yep.
Is it kind of like that, the way you're describing it?
It's not as dark. I mean, it's dark because a lot of people died, but it is in that same vein. Um, yeah, definitely. Again, not it. Chernobyl was amazing, right? This was definitely good, if not great. But yeah, highly recommend. And to touch on what Anthony just said, I was a film minor in college, and I have appreciation of everything. And I don't. Uh, Actually, I do. I do have prejudice towards some really bad stuff. Uh, but I literally have watched thousands and thousands of movies. I think in my life so far. Um, yeah. So if I see something bad, I will definitely let you know. I because I finished watching that, I started watching. I forget what it was called actually. Encounters on Netflix. It's very alien. Texas town. We saw stuff in the sky
Hmm.
and corroborated by many thousands of people, and that's the first episode at least. So I don't know. It's not getting my attention, but it's on in the background for sure.
I'll have to give that one a watch because that's like right up my alley. I like the creepy, the scary, the thriller. So I'm assuming no Five Nights at Freddy's for you, Chris. Too
I am
lowbrow.
I don't know enough about FNAF. Is that what they call it? I know it was a game. I don't know what else is there's a I don't know enough about it. I think it was just literally jump scares. That's how I understood the game was always, and I was like,
Yeah.
I'm not really a fan of jump scares, so I don't know if I would like the film because I didn't really play any of the games.
All right. Well, let's dive into our next conversation. It seems like it's Godzilla fever right now. Apple Plus, I'm serious about that too. There's a lot of Godzilla going around. Apple Plus launched Monarch Legacy of Monsters, which lives within the Godzilla universe, of course. Then at the beginning of December, we get Godzilla -1, which, boys, I think we need to take a field trip to go see that somewhere. That really brings our favorite city smashing behemoth back to his roots in 1954. And then finally, we just got a glimpse into 2024's Godzilla X Kong. X Kong, not X Con. So, boys, why do you think there's so much going on in the Godzilla universe these days? Are things that bad in the world that we just need an overdose on disaster films? Chris, you brought us this topic. What do you think?
I mean, who doesn't love a good kaiju film, right? It's all about, you know, smash them and let's destroy and let's save the earth, and there's a deeper story to it, and that's basically the essence of the original Godzilla's, right? The proliferation of nuclear weapons and the caution to humanity of be careful, you know, what you're getting yourselves into, and so you have a little bit of that underneath all the kaiju, a good kaiju film, in my opinion. I mean, no one hates just a good, you know, smash them and beat them up kind of kaiju film, but I prefer those with the story behind it, and the message, if you will. Why? So it's interesting. There's the Godzilla MonsterVerse, which is the Americanized version of Godzilla, and you know, so Kong and Godzilla, and Kong, you know, Godzilla versus Kong, and King of all monsters, like that storyline is kind of like a rehash, or a Michael Baying of the franchise, to bring it to the American audiences, and to add the Hollywood actors and whatnot to the storyline. Um, and then you have this, uh, you know, Monarch series is kind of trying to fill in the blanks a little bit, from what I understand. The the -1 film is bringing it back to its roots in Japan. That is produced by Toho, which is I guess the owner of the intellectual property of Godzilla. They're the ones that brought it to the world, you know, originally in I think it was the 50s, late 50s, maybe early 60s. Um, so it's not that there's a lot of Godzilla. I think it's the two are playing off of each other. Uh, Godzilla -1 has not been released here in the United States yet. It has been released in Japan and worldwide. It is a smashing success, from what I understand. I'm trying not to spoil it because I definitely want to go see it. I'm not reading any reviews. I'm not checking any of the sites, but I hear that it's highly rated in a couple of headlines that I've perused. So again, I think it's the two playing off of each other. It's like, okay, it's doing really good over there in America. Let's do our own back here in Japan, and kind of keep it going. And they both play off of each other. And you know, we're doing stuff that's more the Japanese audience versus the American audience. I think that's what's going on.
Just so you know, December 1st, it premieres in limited release in the United States. It'll actually be playing in a few Cinemarks here in New Jersey. One over in New Hanover, I think, will be the closest one to us if we do want to take a field trip up there. And then quickly, for those who did not go to film school, what is a kaiju film? Is that just a disaster film, or what's
Big,
kaiju mean?
big monster.
Big monster, big monster. Okay, got it. Thank you, for all of us who smoked pot in college. All right, Eric, what do you think?
Um, it's interesting because I grew up watching the Japanese. Grew up in Asia. I grew up watching mostly, you know, Godzilla, the Japanese version of the Godzilla over the years, and honestly, it was fun to see a Western take, like a modern Western take, because Godzilla has made it across the ocean in the 50s, but a modern Western take on Godzilla and the different kind of approach. I feel like maybe it's just me, but I feel like the Japanese version always tried to have a deeper meaning behind these things, like Chris talked about, whereas the American versions or the Western versions tend to be like the giant monster smashing everything, and it's very Hollywood, very blockbuster kind of situation. So there are places for both of those kind of approaches in my heart, and I think that's why it has stayed in the cultural. Both versions have kind of attracted audiences throughout. I do feel like there's been a resurgence of Godzilla though, and I don't know why. Um, it
He's
has
the
gone.
king. He's the king
Well,
of all monsters.
we know he's the king of monsters, but all the bunch of like acceleration of the Godzilla films, both in Japan and here, that's happened now. The whole MonsterVerse thing is everyone's attempt to build like an MCU kind of situation for
Mm.
all the monsters that what is the legendary have access to, right? And so, um, but the pace of the films in Japan has not slowed down. Like we're talking Godzilla minus one, but I think it was just a few years ago there was what Shin Godzilla that came out.
Yep,
Also
2016.
also another take on it, and so
That was
um
weird. Shin Godzilla was weird.
I really liked it,
It
man.
was good, but I just didn't like the metamorphosizing and all that. I just didn't. It was just a little bit off for me.
Spoiler alert. Well, the Shin films also spawned like a bunch of like Shin Ultraman, Shin, all these kind of movies. But yeah, I don't know the answer, and I think it's very interesting to see the resurgence of this thing over the last like 15 years or so. I wonder if it has to do with copyrights or something. Uh, but
Interesting point.
um, but
I'm
yeah,
sure. I
I
mean,
like it.
Toho's still around. I'm sure nothing is expired. Maybe they have to just keep it fresh so they don't lose their copyrights. Maybe that's
Mhm.
what you mean.
Yeah.
I mean, just so it's very interesting. I didn't know that about you. Got to see it from that side of the world. I got to see it when I was a kid with my best friend growing up. He loved Godzilla. He had all the toys. So I grew up vicariously with him, and we would go to like the local comic shop and they would get the bootlegs from everything overseas. And there were some VHS tapes we picked up that like had no subtitles, so but we would just sit there and watch it mouths agape, and we're like, oh my god, this is the greatest thing ever. It's fantastic. Just watching Godzilla evolve from like the kitschy 60s beat him up, and you could tell this is a guy in a monkey suit, kind of like King Kong kind of thing. We're then getting up to the millennium era and like really stepping up the special effects and having really intricate costumes or digital effects and whatnot. So I loved to watch growing up and seeing that progression. From the 19, I think it was 54 that he was first released, and then like in the 80s when they brought in Raymond Burr and whatnot to try to Americanize it a little bit, catch more of the audiences. But I think there was always a cult following here, especially post-war. American a lot of Americans brought over brides from over there and whatnot. So all that stuff, you know.
Which is
Eric,
really funny, right? You just brought up a point because um, it is so interesting for something like Godzilla to have gotten mainstream, I would say mainstream acceptance here in the United States, when the premise of this entire thing was about Americans bombing Japan. Essentially, that's what it kind of comes down to, right? And that's why this giant monster, and we talk about humanity, we talk about imperialism, you talk about the themes that Godzilla exploring, all the Japanese iterations of it. It's just fascinating to see these kind of things taking off here in the West, which again I find that to be very fascinating.
so Eric, you've started Monarch. What do you think so, or have you finished it?
Well, it's still going.
Oh, right, yeah, it's serialized release, right? Okay, so what do you think
Right.
so far?
Um,
No spoilers.
I
Yeah,
no
no spoilers.
spoilers, so hence me thinking carefully what I'm saying. I think I made this comment before around my approach to these kind of shows and essentially intellectual properties that are spinning off multiple of these kind of productions like movies and TVs, like the same way I approach Star Wars, which is I always appreciate more of
Mm.
what's going on here, right? So more TV shows for Star Wars means more Star Wars. More content for Godzilla here means more kaiju's for me to check out. And I think it's the right approach. I know that it sounds like they're making more Godzilla versus X movies, and having a TV show in the background to kind of talk about some of the backstories is fun. And they, how do I say this? I think it's pretty cool to get a lot more of the backstories and the world building uh, that we wish would have seen in some of these movies that you just don't have the time to kind of get to. So I think it's been very neat to kind of follow it all.
Quick question for all of us. I'll start with Chris. Favorite Godzilla movie and why?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, I'm gonna have to go with the one that started it all, right? It's classic, deepest, message, I think, in my opinion, of what Eric was touching on. Be careful. The world should be careful of what it's doing, with the nuclear proliferation and whatnot, because you could damage the planet and whatnot. So I would have to go with the original 1954 Godzilla.
All right, good choice, Mr. Eric.
Yeah, same. I think a lot of the early Godzilla movies, the ones where like Mothra's in there, I like those. I like the one where when it goes off the rail with like Mecha Godzilla. Like I think I like a lot of the original ones. I will also give a special shout out to the '98 version of Godzilla, even though everyone panned that movie excessively. Um, I remember sitting in theater and going, "Whoa, that is a big monster, and that's cool, right?" And I know it's not well received by a lot of folks, but it was one of those great popcorn movies that I loved. And so, special shout out to the Matthew Broderick Godzilla, which is no longer, I think, quote unquote, in canon anywhere else, but I think it's fun to watch.
I got to say, I remember 85. I think that was kind of like that's when I first became aware of Godzilla. I did like the Matt Broderick one. I have fond memories of that. I think he was the cameraman. No, who was the cameraman? John Leguizamo was the cameraman, or no, it was the guy from The Simpsons. Anyway, they had a great cast. It was great to see kind of Godzilla come back. But I have to say, I'm more of a recent guy. I'm going to fast forward 60 years from the beginning and go to the 2014 version of Godzilla, the Michael Bay-ized version of it. I just felt there was something. Godzilla was very charming, and he was kind of like this curmudgeoning old dude that just wanted to sleep, but all of a sudden these beasts just come out of the water, and he's like, "Oh man, I gotta take care of this now," and then he does it, and then he goes back to sleep. It's like I can relate. I can relate. I just want to stay asleep unless I actually have to go do something. So, hats off to 2014's Godzilla. You are truly the Last Samurai.
I want to ask one last question. What's your favorite non-Godzilla kaiju? And maybe this is more Eric could answer this better because Anthony only looks Godzilla himself.
Wait, you mean in the Godzilla world?
In the Godzilla verse, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like Mothra for me is, I don't know. I mean, she's not real. Sorry, not he, but Mothra is not really in. I don't know. Mothra is an interesting character in the world, and yeah, I like Mothra.
Do you like anybody other than Godzilla, Anthony?
The Cloverfield monster.
Okay.
There should be a crossover. There should be a crossover.
That's a weird monster, but sure.
Why not? It's a great monster.
And my favorite is Rodan.
All right. That's all we have now for this week. Make sure you follow us everywhere at Geeky A Go-Go. Big shout out, as always, to Chris and Eric for your beautiful brains and your expertise on the subject of kaiju. Tim may or may not be back with us next time. We'll decide that after we stop recording. Folks, thank you so much for listening. Make sure you subscribe or follow the podcast on your favorite platform. And until next time, you stay geeky, Internet.
Bye.